The Foxy alien who was freezing when the snow fell too early, sub-CB please. The town had always followed the same rhythm. Summers were warm, but not too hot. Autumn arrived slowly, with dry leaves covering the roads and fields. Winter usually waited until the end of the year. Snow never came early here. That was why everyone felt uneasy when the first snowflakes began to fall in the middle of autumn. At first, people thought it was a mistake. Maybe it was just cold rain that looked like snow. But within hours, white covered the rooftops, the streets, and the open land around the town. Cars slowed down, shops closed early. People stood near their windows, watching the sky with confused faces. Old people said they had never seen anything like this before. No one knew that the early snow was not only a strange weather change, it marked the arrival of someone who did not belong to this world. Far beyond the town lights, near the quiet forest and frozen hills, something burned briefly across the sky. It moved fast and silent, like a falling star that did not shine bright enough to be noticed. It crashed deep into the trees, breaking branches and shaking the ground. The sound was soft, almost swallowed by the falling snow. Inside the damaged craft was a fox-like being. His body was small and light, built for warmth and speed on his own planet. Soft fur covered his arms, legs, and tail, but it was meant for gentle weather, not this sharp cold. His ears twitched as the craft finally stopped moving. Warning lights flickered and then went dark. He lay still for a moment, trying to breathe. The cold reached him almost instantly. It was not just uncomfortable, it was painful. The air burned his lungs, and his fur did little to protect him. He had not planned to land here. The journey had gone wrong, and Earth was never meant to be a stop. With shaking hands, he forced the damaged door open. Snow rushed inside like a living thing. The fox-like alien stepped out slowly, his feet sinking into the white ground. The cold shocked his entire body. His tail dropped low and his ears flattened. This world was far colder than any place he had known. He looked up at the sky. Thick gray clouds blocked the stars. There was no sign of help. No signal answered his calls. His craft was broken, and staying inside it would only make things worse. He needed shelter, warmth, and time. Using what little strength he had, he moved away from the crash site. Senses were sharp, even in pain. He could hear distant sounds from the town cars, faint voices, doors closing. Humans were nearby. That scared him more than the cold. He had studied humans from far away. He knew they were curious, emotional, and unpredictable. Some were kind, others were not. In his weak state, he could not take the risk of being seen. He decided to stay hidden. The forest offered some cover. Tall trees blocked the wind, and fallen leaves under the snow created small, dry spaces. He found a hollow between rocks and crawled inside. It was tight, but it stopped the wind. He wrapped his tail around himself and tried to control his breathing. As night fell, the temperature dropped even more. The snow did not stop, kept falling quietly, covering his tracks and the broken craft behind him. His body trembled uncontrollably. His thoughts drifted to his home planet, where the ground was warm and the air carried soft light instead of cold darkness. He remembered the calm nights there, where freezing was never a fear. Here, every second felt like a test. His fingers felt numb, his ears hurt. He pressed himself closer to the rocks, hoping the cold would slow down. Meanwhile, in the town, people struggled to understand what was happening. News channels talked about strange weather patterns. Schools closed for the day. Children felt excited, but adults felt uneasy. Snow in autumn was not normal, and deep down, people sensed something was wrong. Late at night, the fox-like alien left his shelter briefly to search for anything useful. He moved quietly, careful not to leave clear marks. He found scraps near the edge of town, discarded fabric, cardboard, and broken plastic. To humans, it was trash. To him, it was survival. He dragged what he could back to his hiding place and used his damaged device to create a small amount of heat. It barely worked, but it was enough to stop the shaking for a while. His eyes slowly closed, but sleep did not come easily. Every sound made him alert. Every movement of the wind felt like danger. As the night grew deeper, The snow reflected faint light from the town. The alien watched from the shadows, his sharp eyes full of caution and curiosity. Humans walked with heavy coats and scarves, protecting themselves from the cold. He wondered how they lived in such a place, and how they had adapted so well. By morning, the snow was knee-high in some areas. The fox-like alien woke up weaker than before. His energy was fading. He knew that if he stayed exposed for too long, his body would fail him. He needed a better plan, but his options were limited. The town woke to a silent white world. Everything looked calm, but something unseen was already changing the story of this place. Hidden between trees and frozen ground, the fox-like alien took slow breaths, holding on to life as the snow kept falling earlier than it ever should have. And that was only the beginning. The early snow continued to fall, covering the town and the surrounding forest with a thick, white blanket. The fox-like alien had survived the first night, but his body was still weak and cold. He had learned that simply staying in one place was not enough. The snow would continue, and without proper shelter or food, he would not last long. He needed to find a better hiding place, something that could protect him from the harsh winter that had come too early. Slowly and carefully, he moved through the snow-covered forest. Every step was difficult because the snow was deep, and his small body struggled to push through it. His paws, soft and sensitive, ached from the cold. He missed the warm soil of his home planet, where he could run freely without feeling pain from the cold. Here, the ground was icy, and every touch burned his skin slightly. He wrapped his tail around his body as a shield. Trying to keep some warmth, he found a small, cave-like opening between two large rocks. It was not a proper cave, but it offered protection from the falling snow and the biting wind. Inside, he collected fallen leaves, broken branches, and pieces of old fabric that had blown into the forest from the town. He made a small bed as best as he could. It was uncomfortable, but it was better than lying directly on the cold snow. His body still trembled from the cold, but at least he was safe from the wind. Food was the next problem. The alien's body needed energy to survive, especially in such harsh weather. He had never eaten the same food as humans, but he knew he had to adapt. He carefully moved toward the edge of the forest, where he saw small animals scurrying through the snow. Birds, squirrels, and rabbits were his natural prey, but catching them in this unfamiliar and cold environment was not easy. His movements had to be precise and silent. Every time he tried to catch something, the snow made noise, and the animals ran away. Sometimes he found scraps of food left by humans. He noticed that near the roads, some trash bins had bits of bread, fruit, and even leftovers from restaurants. He would wait until night to approach. The darkness helped him stay hidden. He learned quickly that humans were curious creatures. If they saw him, they might be afraid or try to chase him. He had to be careful. During the day, he stayed hidden in his small shelter. He listened to the sounds of the town, footsteps on snow, distant voices, cars moving slowly on icy roads. Each sound reminded him of the difference between his world and this one. On his planet, the air was gentle and life was quiet. Here, the environment was harsh and everything moved fast. Humans seemed strong, but they had their struggles too. The alien began to feel a strange curiosity about them. How did they survive in this cold? How did they keep going despite the challenges? One evening, as he searched for food near the town's edge, he noticed something unusual. A human had stopped, looking around carefully. The person seemed to sense that something was out of place. The alien froze in his tracks, hiding behind a snow-covered bush. His heart beat fast. He had studied humans from a distance, but he had never interacted with one. Their reactions were unpredictable. Some humans were kind and others could be dangerous. In that moment, he realized how fragile his situation was. One mistake could cost him his life. The human did not stay long. After a few minutes, they walked away, leaving the alien alone in the snow. He breathed a silent sigh of relief and returned to his shelter. That night, he thought about the human he had seen. He wondered if humans could ever be friends, or if they would always be a threat. He did not have the luxury to dwell on these thoughts for too long, though. His body was getting weaker, and he needed more energy. The cold nights were the hardest. Even in his small shelter, the temperature dropped below what he could tolerate. His tail, which usually kept him warm, could not provide enough heat. His paws and ears were numb, and he sometimes felt dizzy. He realized that survival in this world required more than instinct. He needed a plan to endure the long nights and the early snow. During one particularly harsh night, he discovered a small stream nearby. The water was not frozen, surprisingly, and it provided him with much-needed hydration. He drank carefully, avoiding slipping on the icy rocks. The water gave him strength, but he knew it was not enough. He needed food, shelter, and a way to keep warm. The early snowstorm was not just a challenge. It was a test of his will and intelligence. As the days passed, he learned to read the patterns of the town and the forest. He noticed when humans were active and when it was safe to move. He also found small hidden places where he could rest during the day without being seen. His survival instincts sharpened, and he became more careful with each step. He began to understand that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about understanding the environment and using it to his advantage. One afternoon, while scavenging for food, he came across another sign of humans' presence. A small child had dropped a piece of bread near the forest edge. The alien approached cautiously and took the bread. It was not the same as the food he was used to, but it provided energy. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. Humans could be unknowingly helpful. Maybe there were others who would not harm him. Despite his progress, the early snow and cold continued to take a toll. His body ached, and he often shivered uncontrollably. Nights were long and lonely, and sometimes he felt despair. Yet each day he survived, his mind grew sharper, and his understanding of this new world deepened. He realized that he was not just surviving, he was learning. Learning how to adapt, how to hide, how to find food and water, and how to move without being seen. The alien also noticed changes in himself. His sharp senses, once meant for his warm planet, were now tuned to the cold and quiet of this Earth's winter. He could hear the soft crunch of snow underfoot, the distant barking of a dog, and the faint whisper of the wind through the trees. Every sound was a signal. Every movement mattered. The forest became his world, and the town was a distant, curious place full of unknown dangers. By the end of the second week, he had created a small routine. Daytime was for rest and observation. Nighttime was for searching for food and water. He had learned to avoid humans as much as possible, though he watched them from a distance. Their behavior fascinated him. Some humans seemed joyful, playing in the snow, while others were stressed, rushing to complete daily tasks. He wondered how life could be so different from what he had known, yet so similar in its need to survive. The alien also realized that he was not alone in feeling the cold and struggle. Animals in the forest were adapting too. He observed birds huddling together, squirrels hiding their food, and rabbits digging through the snow. Life continued, even in harsh conditions. He drew inspiration from them, learning new ways to survive. Each day was a challenge, but it was also a lesson. He began to understand that even in a world as cold and foreign as this, life could continue if one was careful, observant, and determined. As the early snowstorm raged on, the alien's strength slowly returned. He was not completely safe, but he was surviving. Each small success finding food, staying warm, avoiding humans, gave him hope. He began to dream of a time when he might leave this frozen world, return home, or at least find a place where he could live without fear. But for now, the forest and the town were his reality, and survival was his only goal. Even though he was small, cold, and far from home, he had begun to understand the resilience of life on Earth. This harsh, early winter was testing him in ways he had never imagined, but it was also teaching him the most important lesson of all. Adaptation was the key to survival. And as the snow continued to fall, covering everything in white, the fox-like alien pressed on, determined to endure, to survive, and to find a way through the freezing days that had come too early. The early snow had now been falling for more than 2 weeks, covering the town, the forest, and the frozen hills in thick white layers. The fox-like alien had grown more cautious and clever in his movements. He had learned where to find food and water, how to hide from humans, and how to protect himself from the biting cold. Yet, despite his growing skill, he could not shake the feeling of loneliness. There was no one like him on this planet. No one who understood his language, his experiences, or the struggles of surviving in an environment so different from the one he had always known. One evening, as the sun began to set behind gray clouds, he noticed movement near the edge of the forest. A human was walking slowly, carrying a small bag and looking around carefully. Unlike the other humans he had observed, this one seemed gentle and patient, moving with care and watching the ground as if searching for something. The alien froze, his body pressed low against the snow-covered ground. He considered fleeing, but something in the way this human moved made him hesitate. There was no hurry, no fear, no aggression, just quiet attention. Over the next few nights, he noticed the same human returning. Each time the person brought small things, pieces of fruit, scraps of bread, even a small blanket. The alien did not understand why at first. He had never seen humans act like this toward creatures they did not know. He had always thought humans were unpredictable, sometimes dangerous. But this one seemed different. There was kindness in the careful way the human placed the food near his hiding spot. It was almost as if they understood that the alien needed help. Even though they had never met, the alien began to study the human from a safe distance. He noticed that the person never got too close, never tried to touch him. Instead, they left the items and then quietly walked away. Sometimes the human paused, looking around as if listening for sounds, and then continued home. The alien watched these actions with cautious curiosity. He did not know if he could trust this human, but he felt a strange sense of safety he had not felt since landing on this cold, unfamiliar planet, one particularly cold night. The alien felt a wave of weakness unlike anything before. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he could barely move. He had eaten little and had not rested properly, and the constant snow had drained his energy. For the first time, he felt fear, not just of humans, but of his own body failing him. He thought about the warmth of his home planet, about the soft ground and gentle nights. But he was here, on Earth, alone in the snow. Survival depended on action, yet he felt too weak to act. Then he remembered the small gifts the human had left over the past nights. Desperation gave him courage. Slowly, he crawled out of his shelter and moved toward the place where the human had left food that evening. His paws sank into the snow, and his body shivered with every step, but he continued. The snow was deep, the cold was sharp, and the wind cut through his fur. But he forced himself to reach the small pile of food. He ate slowly, feeling his strength returning little by little. He realized that the human was helping him survive, even if they did not understand exactly who or what he was. Over the next few days, the alien began to look forward to these nightly encounters. He stayed hidden, but he started to move closer to the edge of the forest, where he could see the human more clearly. He noticed small habits, the way the person always wore a thick scarf, the careful steps they took to avoid slipping, the gentle hands that carried food. Each observation filled him with a sense of hope. Perhaps humans were not as unpredictable as he had thought. Perhaps there was kindness here, even in this harsh and early winter. Despite this small connection, he still felt the need to remain cautious. The town was full of other humans, and they were not all like this one. He could not risk being discovered. The fox-like alien had learned the importance of stealth and patience. Every movement had to be deliberate, every decision carefully calculated. One mistake could expose him to danger. Yet, at the same time, he felt a growing desire to interact, to trust, and perhaps even to communicate. It was a new feeling, one that made him both nervous and hopeful. One evening, the alien noticed that the human had left something different, a small lantern, dimly glowing, placed carefully near a tree. The warmth from the light was minimal, but it created a safe space in the darkness. For the first time, the alien felt the urge to approach more closely. He stepped out from behind the snow-covered bushes, careful to stay in the shadows, and observed the human from only a few meters away. The lantern flickered gently, and he felt a strange comfort in its light. It was almost as if the human had created a small, safe world just for him. As the nights passed, The silent connection grew stronger. The alien began to recognize patterns in the human's behavior, the times they would leave food, the moments they would pause and watch, the careful retreats back into the town. He began to feel gratitude, a deep sense of thankfulness for the small acts of care. It was the first time since arriving on Earth that he did not feel completely alone. Though words were impossible, a quiet bond had formed between them, a bond of trust, patience, and mutual respect. During the day, the alien continued to explore and find resources. He discovered hidden pockets in the forest where he could stay warmer, small caches of berries, and shallow areas of the stream where the water was easier to reach. He became more agile, more skilled at moving without leaving a trace, more aware of his environment. Yet, the cold remained relentless, and he knew that he could not survive on instinct alone. The human's presence reminded him that he was not entirely alone, and that even small gestures could make a difference in survival. The alien also began to learn more about humans by watching them from a distance. He noticed the relationships they shared, the care for one another, the small acts of kindness, the way they protected the weak. It was different from the harsh survival methods he had seen in other species, yet it was effective. Humans had adapted to this world in ways that he could admire. He began to think about how he could repay the kindness he had received, though he did not yet know how. One snowy night, a sudden storm blew across the town and forest. The wind howled, snow fell in thick sheets, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. The alien struggled to reach the safety of his small shelter. His body ached from the cold, and every step required enormous effort. But the lantern the human had left that night acted as a guide, a beacon in the white darkness. He crawled toward it, following the faint glow, and finally reached the small safety of his temporary home. The storm raged outside, but inside he felt a fragile sense of protection. That night, he realized something important. Survival was not just about food, water, and warmth. It was about trust, hope, and connection. The human had given him all three in the smallest of ways: small scraps of food, a simple blanket, a tiny lantern. These gestures had kept him alive, but more importantly, they had given him a reason to keep going, a reason to endure the freezing nights that had come too early. Over time, the alien grew bolder. He began to leave small signs of his present careful movements to clean up the area near the lantern, rearranging the blanket to make it more comfortable, hiding items he could not use but might be useful later. He wanted the human to see that he appreciated the effort. Though he could not speak their language, he could communicate through action. It was a silent conversation, full of understanding and respect. By now, the alien had begun to understand the rhythm of the town and the forest. He knew when it was safe to move, when to hide, and when to wait. The snow continued to fall early, but he was no longer completely defenseless against it. He had learned how to survive in this cold, unfamiliar world. He had learned that even in isolation, connection was possible. The quiet bond he shared with the human had become his anchor, a lifeline in the endless white landscape. And so, the fox-like alien continued his struggle and his silent friendship. Each day brought new challenges, but also new hope. The early snowstorm that had seemed like an endless threat had become a test, teaching him patience, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. Though the alien remained cautious and hidden, he had discovered something more important than food or warmth. He had discovered the possibility of connection, even in the coldest, loneliest nights. The snow had continued to fall for weeks, covering every tree, rooftop, and field in thick white layers. The fox-like alien had survived so far, but he felt his body weakening more than ever. The cold, the hunger, and the exhaustion had begun to take a heavy toll. His paws ached, his ears were constantly numb, and his tail, which had always been his source of warmth, could no longer keep him comfortable. The early winter was proving far harsher than he had anticipated. For the first time, he realized that his survival might not be possible without help. That night, as he rested in his small shelter, he shivered uncontrollably. Every breath seemed to freeze in his chest. He wanted to move, to search for food, or to find a warmer spot, but his body felt too weak. He curled up tightly, wrapping his tail around himself, trying to preserve what little warmth he had left. The snowstorm outside intensified, and the wind howled through the forest like a living creature. The fox-like alien's mind raced. He could not remember the last time he had felt so powerless. Suddenly, he heard a familiar sound, the crunch of footsteps in the snow. His ears twitched sharply. His heart began to race. Could it be a human? One of the town people? Or was it the kind human who had left him food and warmth so many nights before? Weak and cautious, he crawled out from his shelter, his body trembling, and moved slowly toward the sound. Staying low to the ground, through the snow, he saw the figure of the human approaching, carrying a small basket of food and a thick cloth. The human stopped, noticing the fox-like creature lying partially hidden in the snow. Instead of fear, their eyes softened. They knelt down carefully, placing the basket and cloth near him. There was no rush, no attempt to touch him forcefully, only a gentle offering of help. The alien's instincts told him to run, but he was too weak. Something inside him told him to stay, to trust. Slowly, he moved closer to the food. Trembling from both cold and uncertainty, he ate slowly, savoring the warmth and nourishment that the food brought. For the first time, he realized that the human had saved him more than once, without even knowing exactly who or what he was. His energy began to return, just slightly, enough to regain some control over his body. He looked at the human with silent gratitude, wishing he could communicate, explain, or say thank you. But words were impossible. He could only look with his eyes, and the human seemed to understand the unspoken thanks. The next day the storm worsened. The snow piled higher, blocking paths and covering everything he had relied on for survival. The alien realized he could not stay in the same place any longer. He needed shelter that could withstand the worsening weather. He tried to move, dragging his weak body through the snow, but the cold was relentless. Each step burned his paws, and he shivered violently. He remembered the warm nights on his home planet and longed for even a moment of that comfort. But Earth's winter showed no mercy, and he had to endure. During the day, human returned, noticing signs that the alien had moved slightly. They followed quietly, careful not to disturb him, left small items along the path: a blanket, extra scraps of food, and even a small lantern to give light and warmth. The fox-like alien felt a mixture of curiosity and fear. He had never experienced anything like this. Humans could be unpredictable, but this one showed care and patience. Their actions gave him hope, but also reminded him of his vulnerability. He was still a stranger in a world that could easily harm him. That night, the alien felt his strength failing further. His body could barely hold itself upright, and the thought of being trapped in the snow and cold forever terrified him. He needed warmth more than ever. He crawled toward the lantern the human had left, curling up near it to try and absorb what little heat it gave. The human stayed at a distance, watching quietly, ensuring he was safe. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The bond they shared had grown beyond language. It was based on trust, care, and survival. As the snowstorm raged on, the alien realized he could no longer survive on instinct alone. He needed help to recover. He also understood that the human already knew something was unusual about him. The careful gestures, the patience, and the consistency suggested understanding. But revealing himself fully was risky. Humans could be afraid, curious, or even hostile. Yet, he also felt that staying hidden might lead to death. The decision weighed heavily on him. Finally, one night, when his body could not endure another second of weakness, he revealed himself fully. Slowly, he stepped out into the faint light of the lantern, trembling and shivering. His ears twitched nervously, his tail drooped, and his eyes reflected both fear and trust. The human gasped softly but did not move away. Instead, they knelt down, keeping their distance, their eyes full of understanding. The fox-like alien's small hands shook as he tried to explain his situation through gestures, expressions, and subtle movements. It took time, but the human began to understand. They could see the alien was not a typical animal or human. The damaged craft near the forest hinted at his true origin, and his unique appearance confirmed it. Yet there was no fear, only a desire to help. The human extended warmth, care, and protection without hesitation, offering blankets, food, and support. Slowly, the alien began to feel a safety he had not known since arriving on Earth. Days passed, and the fox-like alien began to recover, though slowly. The human stayed near, checking on him and ensuring he had everything he needed. The storm continued outside, but inside their small, makeshift shelter, he found warmth and comfort. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that he could survive. Hope that he could one day leave this cold world safely. Hope that humans could be allies rather than threats. During these days, the alien learned more about humans by observing the kind person who cared for him. He noticed their patience, resilience, and small acts of care. They spoke softly to him, even though he did not understand their words. The tone, gestures, and expressions conveyed kindness, patience, and encouragement. He began to realize that this connection could mean the difference between life and death. The human had become more than a helper. They had become a lifeline. Despite this progress, the early snow continued to create challenges. The forest and town were both dangerous during the storm. Supplies were limited, and the alien still needed food, water, and warmth to survive fully. He had to remain cautious, but with the human's help, he could focus on recovering rather than only surviving. Each day he grew stronger, more aware, and more confident in his movements. The storm, though harsh, had taught him resilience and the importance of connection. By the end of this period, the fox-like alien had not only recovered enough to move more freely, but it also formed a deep, unspoken bond with the human. He trusted them, and in return, they had accepted him without fear. For the first time since landing on Earth, he felt that survival was possible. And even more than survival, he felt hope. The early snow had tested him in every way, but through patience, observation, and trust, he had learned that life could continue, even in the harshest conditions. And so in the quiet nights, under the faint glow of the lantern and the thick snow covering the world outside, the fox-like alien rested safely for the first time. He knew that the challenges were not over, that the snow and cold could return with greater force. But for now, he had warmth, food, safety, and, most importantly, a friend who had shown him the power of care and understanding. The frozen world was still dangerous, but for the first time, he felt that he was not alone. That gave him the courage to endure whatever came next. The snow that had fallen so early in the season had now covered everything in the town. Forest and hills in thick, unbroken white. For weeks, the fox-like alien had struggled to survive. His small body had endured hunger, cold, and exhaustion. But now, with the human's care and patience, he was finally beginning to feel strong again. The food, warmth, and small gestures of kindness had not only restored his body, but had also given him a reason to hope. For the first time, he could imagine a life beyond mere survival. The human continued their quiet support. Each evening, they would leave small amounts of food, blankets, and the lantern that gave gentle light and warmth. Over time, the alien grew brave enough to approach more closely. He would watch the human as they worked quietly, sometimes talking softly, sometimes simply observing the snow. Though he could not speak their language, he could understand their intentions through gestures, expressions, and tone. Slowly, trust blossomed into a unique, silent companionship. One day, as the storm calmed for a brief period, the alien ventured out beyond the small area he had been hiding in. His body had regained strength, and his movements were more confident. He explored cautiously, noting hidden places where he could rest. Patches of frozen ground that were safer to walk on, and small streams that provided water. The snow was still deep, and the air sharp and cold, but he had learned how to navigate it carefully. He realized that survival was not only about enduring the cold, but also about understanding the world around him and adapting to it. The human noticed the alien's growing strength. They watched quietly from a distance, giving him space to explore while still offering guidance through small, unobtrusive gestures. Sometimes they would place extra blankets or food in areas where he could find them. And sometimes they would simply sit nearby, letting him know he was not alone. The alien learned to appreciate the silent support. He began to understand that the human's kindness was not just about helping him survive. It was a connection, a reminder that even in a world as cold and harsh as this, care could exist. As the weeks passed, the fox-like alien began to regain much of his natural energy. He ran through the forest with lighter steps, his fur catching the faint light of the lanterns and the snow reflecting the gray skies. The early winter had tested him in every way, but he had endured. He had grown stronger not only physically, but emotionally, learning patience, observation, and the quiet power of trust. The human had become more than a helper. They had become a friend, companion in a world that had once felt empty and hostile. One evening, the alien approached the human more closely than ever. He sat quietly, his small body curled up in the snow, and looked at the human with eyes full of understanding and gratitude. The human responded with a soft smile, reaching out slowly with a hand to offer more warmth and comfort. For a moment, the bond between them felt complete, a silent communication that needed no words. They had both understood the challenges, the fears, and the hope that had carried them through the early snowstorm. But the alien knew that his time on Earth was limited. His damaged craft, still hidden in the forest, had to be repaired if he was ever to return to his home planet. The human had no knowledge of how to fix such a thing, yet the alien's growing strength gave him the courage to attempt it himself. Using small tools from his craft and fragments of technology he had managed to preserve, he worked quietly while the human watched from a safe distance, offering light, warmth, and moral support. Each careful movement brought him closer to the possibility of leaving this cold world. Days passed as he repaired the craft. The human continued to provide food, blankets, and the small lanterns that lit his workspace. They shared quiet moments, sitting together while the alien worked, watching the snow fall silently around them. The fox-like alien felt a deep sense of connection, a bond that had grown from mutual respect and care. He realized that this connection had helped him survive more than any warmth or food. It had given him hope, a reason to endure the harsh winter, and the courage to face the challenge of leaving Earth. Finally, the craft was ready. It was not perfect, but it was functional enough to lift off. The alien knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he had the strength to survive it. Before leaving, he turned to the human, trying to communicate a mixture of gratitude, farewell, and promise. He gestured to the craft, then to the human, and finally to the snow-covered forest. The human nodded, understanding perfectly. Though words were impossible, their connection transcended language. As the alien climbed into his small craft, he took one last look at the forest, the lanterns, and the town in the distance. The snow still fell gently, covering everything in white, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt peaceful, a silent witness to the struggles, the care, and the resilience that had brought him through the early winter. The human watched quietly from the edge of the forest. Their expression, a mixture of pride, relief, and sadness. With a soft hum, the craft lifted off the snowy ground. The fox-like alien felt the warmth of life returning fully, the energy to fly and navigate. Below him, the forest and town grew smaller, the snow-covered world stretching endlessly. He felt a mix of sadness for leaving the human who had saved him and excitement for returning to his home planet. The early snowstorm that had seemed so cruel now felt like a test that he had passed, the story of endurance, connection, and hope. As the craft soared into the sky, the alien looked back one final time. He saw the human standing quietly, watching him leave. Their eyes met in a silent farewell, a promise that kindness and connection could endure even across worlds. The alien's heart was full, and he felt a deep gratitude for the simple, patient care that had allowed him to survive. He realized that life on Earth had taught him lessons that no storm, no cold, and no distance could ever erase. Flying higher. He felt the warmth of his own strength returning fully. The cold, the hunger, and the fear that had plagued him for weeks began to fade. He could see the horizon, faintly lit by the last gray light of winter, and he knew that he would survive the journey home. The early snow that had seemed so relentless now felt like a memory, a story of struggle and hope that he would carry with him forever. Back in the town, life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. People continued their daily routines, unaware of the small, extraordinary events that had taken place in the forest during the early winter. But for the fox-like alien and the human who had helped him, the story was unforgettable. The lessons of patience, trust, and kindness had changed them both, creating a bond that even across space and worlds would never be forgotten. As the craft disappeared into the sky, the fox-like alien felt a quiet peace. He had endured the harsh early snow, survived the cold and isolation, and discovered the power of connection and care. Though Earth had been a strange and challenging place, it had also been a place of hope and learning. The early snowstorm, once so terrifying, had become a symbol of resilience, friendship, and the possibility of life even in the harshest conditions. And so, the fox-like alien flew toward his home, carrying with him the warmth of kindness, the lessons of survival. In the memory of the human who had helped him endure the early snow, though worlds apart, their silent bond remained. A reminder that even in the coldest and loneliest times, care, patience, and hope could create something powerful, unbreakable, and lasting.